episode 338, Math Success with No Textbook.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
So today we're talking with Mandi Tolen, high school math teacher from Missouri, and has been teaching for 18 years. Now, I heard Mandi speak at ISTE this summer on the Ditch panel. Shout out to Matt Miller and all of his amazing panelists he had. But Mandi, let's start with something you said that was pretty profound. Now, you ditched your textbook, but then you made a little bit of a mistake. What was it?
So after I had gotten rid of my textbook, I started creating my own content in the form of packets. So in essence, I had just created another textbook of my own choosing.
Yeah, so what was wrong with that?
Well, the problem was I had just created another textbook, so I hadn't really changed how I was teaching. I hadn't changed the delivery of instruction to students. I just didn't have a textbook anymore.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about some of the things that you use instead of the textbook to teach, because you still have your standards, right? You still have your content that you're teaching.
Absolutely.
And that's a mistake a lot of people make, is they think, oh, the teacher just runs around and does everything. No, you still have your standards that you're following. You just may not have a textbook. Okay, so you mentioned one on the panel that I just loved. Let's start with that one.
Okay, well, in Matt's book, he had discussed a choose-your-own-adventure project that he had done with his Spanish students. And I absolutely loved that idea and thought, how cool would this be to do this with math students and to get them to create and share their own ideas? So I came up with a plan to create these choose-your-own-adventure stories using Google Forms in my classroom. The cool thing about this was students not only created their own equations, but then they had to go on and explain the misconception, because one of the answer choices had to be an incorrect answer based on a common misconception that students would do with that standard.
What tool were you using, and did the kids actually get to play each other's adventure stories?
They did. So one of the things that we do is peer feedback. So the first year I did that, I was the audience and our classroom was the audience, and they created for the other students in the classroom. As I continued with this project, I realized that if they had an audience bigger than our school, I think it would be more authentic to them and it would be more special. So we paired up with another school in the state of Missouri, and we sent our choose your own adventure stories to them. And then the first year they gave us feedback on a Google Doc. Here's the story that I reviewed. Here's what I liked. Here's some things you could change. But last year I used Flipgrid. So when the students gave feedback, it was video feedback. And my students really enjoyed that. They got to see the student who reviewed their story. They could then respond and thank them for doing that or ask follow-up questions. It was an amazing project.
Okay, so help me understand, when they write these adventure stories, they're putting them in a Google Slides and then they click to go to which choice or what?
They're putting them in a Google form. And in a Google form, you can choose an option to go to a different slide based on your answer choice.
Ah, okay, so they're actually getting some computational thinking.
They are. It's a little bit of basic programming that goes along with it.
Okay, so you have this exciting way where they're having a global audience, they're connecting, they're talking about the correct way to do something and common misconceptions. Now, some people would question you and say, hey, why do you want the kids to understand the common misconceptions?
It's good for them to see if they're headed down the path with the common misconception. And a lot of times students, because we discuss the misconceptions as we go along. It's one of those table talk discussions. And then we share out the misconceptions that we've seen. Students don't realize that that's a misconception that they've been doing. And by seeing somebody else explain it, it helps them understand the process.
Okay, so what are some other things that you've done instead of just the regular old, let's do section 1, let's do section 2, let's talk about section 3, let's work the even numbers on section 4?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I like to emphasize is that not everybody understands a concept or a standard the first time. So in my classroom, it's very formative up until the end of the semester. So we create activities where we can differentiate for different students using Google Slides, and it's kind of a self-directed learning, which allows me to float around the classroom and help students on whatever topic they're needing to work on. But it's mostly self-directed. They can just ask me clarifying questions.
So let me ask you this. Are you still working math problems?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Describe for us the flow of a math class in your class, Mandi.
Well, and people ask me that question a lot, and it kind of depends on the day because we don't do the exact same thing every day. My class always starts with some sort of a warm-up activity. It may be which one doesn't belong, or here's a prior knowledge type question. We're going to build on this today. What do you remember about it? It just could be a retrieval practice type question that we're working for the day. And then depending on what we're doing, it could be one of these differentiated instruction days where the students are working on the topic that they need to work on. It could be a whole class activity where we're doing a collaborative slide and they're going to create notes together, or they're going to create a vocabulary notebook together using these collaborative slides. I do offer practice. I don't give points for the practice because it is exactly that. It's practice. And the students have some choice even in that. They have a choice menu of what practice they would like to do. And I always tell them, do as much as you need and stop when you think you're there. I provide them answers to those practice problems so they know if they're getting them right.
So what kind of devices do your students have?
We have Chromebooks.
How do you give them the choice menu?
So I can put that in a Google slide and launch that through Google Classroom where they have the options. Here are some problems you can do. You can choose 3 of these, or here's a project. If you would rather do the project, you can do that.
Okay, so this is a question everybody asks. You know what it is, don't you, Mandi?
Probably.
What do you think it is?
How do you manage all of that?
Well, that's part of it. Let's go there, and then we'll talk about test scores, which is the other question people always ask.
Okay.
So how do you manage it all?
Google Classroom is a huge benefit. That way, students, when they turn their project in, I can give them feedback. I also build in collaboration time in my classroom so that I can talk to students individually about what we need to work on and the direction we need to go. And, do you maybe need to do a little bit more practice? Or the last time you chose this project, but you didn't seem to understand the concepts, maybe some more direct practice would be better.
Okay, so give us the names of the classes that you're teaching, because folks will want to know that, and then tell us about how your test scores are doing.
I teach Algebra 1, which is a highly tested area, and I teach geometry, which we don't test in our school. We don't test geometry. So when we started doing this, our test scores weren't very good, and we've seen a steady increase in our test scores since we've been doing the choice menus. We've been focusing on the standards and making sure that we are designing activities that meet what the learners need for the standard.
While your ditch panel was going on, I was tweeting out, obviously, some comments of things that were happening. And I really got some pushback on Twitter saying that, well, some teachers, like Mandi or Matt, they really know their content area. And then you get teachers who come in and they don't really know the content area. And if they don't have a textbook, then how do they even start?
Well, I have the privilege of working with new teachers in our building when they come in, and I sit down with them and tell them we don't have a textbook. We go by the standards. We break down the standard to the verb level. What is the standard asking the student to do? And then we just train those teachers. Here's how you create your content to meet the actual standard. And then you can create learning activities that are more engaging, actually hit the standard better, and are more student-centered and a little less teacher-centered.
So how are these new teachers responding? Do they feel like this is something they learned in college?
They don't feel like it's something that they learned in college, but the new teachers that are working under me love it. And as they go out then and are no longer underneath me kind of as their mentor teacher, they are amazing educators.
Wow. So, this is going to blow a lot of folks' minds. So, Mandi, where are the resources people can go for those who are ditching the textbook in math?
Well, I have 2 different websites that I share content on. One of them, which I also get a little pushback on this name, but it's called Make Math Not Suck.
Okay.
And the reason that it's called that is because when I interview students and ask them about their experiences in math, that's the first thing they tell me.
Yeah.
And so my goal was to create content that would help students enjoy math and not dislike it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, what's the other one?
The other one is called Infinitely Teaching, which is also a play on the math word there with infinity. But both of those are .wordpress.com.
Awesome. Okay, educators, it can be done. There are lots of folks that are moving away from a strict textbook-focused class, focusing on the standards, and their test scores are going up. So even if you're just going to integrate a few of her differentiated ideas, a few of her choice ideas, the choose your own adventure story, these are all techniques you can use, even if you are using the textbook, even if your school won't let you give it up yet. So take some grains of ideas here. Remember, we innovate like a turtle. We just move forward a tiny little bit every week. So there's definitely something you can pick here, math teachers, and I challenge you to pick something.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.